cricket world. Now the rule seems coming to...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 52 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I am your co-host, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, and you know who's with me.
Yep, Santoki back again. Pleasure to be back on MASH. And today we're looking at a topic which causes endless debate in the region. We're looking at batting in the Caribbean. And we've got a special guest on, someone who've been looking forward to having on for the past few months, MASH.
Indeed, yeah. We've been trying to sort this guest out since possibly, I can't even remember which tour. There's been so much cricket this year that I can't even remember which tour or series we were first thinking about getting our guest on. But as ever, if you're watching on the visuals, you can already see who the guest is. But if you listen to our podcast on the audio, we're going to do an intro now. The number one question we get anytime West Indies play in any format of cricket, it always seems to revolve around West Indies and batting and batsmen and this, that, and the other. So we thought, who better to get on than the West Indies batting coach himself, otherwise known to those in the Caribbean as Monty Desai. But we said to Monty before he came on air, we're gonna introduce Monty by his actual government name, which is Mrugang Desai, which I possibly pronounced wrong anyway. But for the rest of this episode, we may shift to Monty. But Monty, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, mate. And I must say that you did pronounce it very, very much up to the mark, if I would have to put it.
Love that. So when it's Santoki, I'm going to make sure I want to see Santoki pronounce it correctly as well when he comes back in. But Monty or Mrugang will shift across the whole episode in terms of what we say. But as we kind of said in the intro, we want to kind of, and what I've called this episode title for episode 52 is the fundamentals of batting. So it's not, we didn't really want to get you on just to talk about West Indies and batting in the West Indies, because at the end of the day, as far as we're concerned, you're a batting coach irrespective of which team it is that you work for or would be working for, and so on and so forth. But for the listeners and those who are watching on the visuals, first things first, I think it's important that you just talk to us about your rise in the game itself, like the beginnings of your career, how you got into cricket, how you got to where you are now. Because with the greatest respects, a lot of people within the diaspora and in the Caribbean back home won't necessarily know too much about you. They'll know that you're the batting coach, possibly, and they will have seen your face, but they won't necessarily know your kind of growth in the game. So over to you, really, to kind of introduce yourself and your career and your pathway in the game.
Well, it's a very interesting way to start off. And I obviously come from a little bit of a deep background of coaching, to be honest, than playing. And I, like any other Indian back home, aspires to become a cricketer, no different to me as well. And I come from mobile cricket, so I've seen a lot of Maidan cricket in my young days. And we talk about Maidan cricket a lot back home, because there are 25 games happening in one big oval. Balls can come from whichever ends, and it just makes you stay in present. And one of my biggest thing which I have learned as a cricketer at club levels and whatever I could achieve at that point was just to be in present, being in now. Look, I think if I have to talk about my playing days and all that, it will be a lot of things to talk about in terms of what I couldn't achieve. But, so rather I move and shift it towards an opportunity which I got very early in my young days to get into coaching. It was an accidental journey to just uplift my own club. And what I realized through that was that there were a few seniors around me, and an act of kindness, which in one way, also put me across a responsible job. One, to run the club, and at the same time to see to it that the youngsters who come in the club, how can we groom them? And then obviously the curious mind takes over. There are questions around how do I help these kids, because even myself in mid-age of 20s, I'm acting like, someone who is already a 40-year-old teacher, which is not the reality. But at the same time, I was blessed enough to have a teacher in my own family. My mother was a teacher in a school for many years. and some of the education which comes across as part of my reflection when I look back at it is even now, is that one great message which I got from her was to always look out for good and great things in life and see how you can bring that across to whoever you meet and in yourself as well. So that's how it started off for me as far as my coaching journey is concerned. And then I was fortunate enough to come across a lot of senior experienced people in Mumbai who did the same kind of things like any other coach will go through grassroots level of coaching for many years, age group coaching with Mumbai Cricket for a while. And then again, I was fortunate to come across late Sri Hanuman Singh. He's not any, is he passed away a few years ago, I think almost a decade now, 2006, 2007. Late Sri Hanuman Singh. And 4 or 5 years which I spent with him in Mumbai at CCI was probably my, what do you call, a complete education of coaching, assisting him. Because what happened in that period was we had a lot of English counties visiting us, and they wanted to learn batting against spin, and there were bowlers who were coming to learn bowling spin. And that's how it started off for me. Obviously, we had the expertise of bringing across how to bat against spin and how to manage the Indian conditions and so on, and so forth, as far as their progress is concerned. So when you go through that journey, you realize that the feedback which you're getting from the established players who are coming across makes you understand that you can give more, you can contribute more. And one thing led me to the other stuff, and somehow I was able to get a breakthrough. Not somehow, again, what do you call? If I have to name it, I moved to US in 2006 for good. I was doing a bit of work over there as well, but I was basically recommended, at the same time insisted by my friend Zubin Barucha to come back to India and do some work with a franchise, Rajasthan Royals, who were looking for the Indian side of things to be put in place, scouting as well as coaching. And that was 7-8 years of journey with them. Again, it kind of developed me as a coach as well. And I think being in the dressing room around with more established players, you pick up their brains and you just keep on developing your own coaching skills around it. After that, the whole journey to move around few associate countries like Nepal, Canada, UAE. Same thing, you want to contribute. You want to contribute to the dressing room. You want to ensure that you develop an environment where the learning happens. You're looking at developing players. You're ensuring that their confidence stays up through preparation, which we try to put in, one individually as a coach yourself, as well as the team of coaches who works towards it. And while you mentioned about batting, I think it's something which also comes across as roles which you get on your journey. So when someone believes that you can help out the team with the batting department, you walk in and you put up a good show out there. The recommendation goes around that he's someone who can help out in this one department, so you get another job in the same profile, so you just keep on growing in that one area. But I love talking about bowling as well, and I think if you talk to many coaches, they love to talk about all three departments, and there could be sometimes also those conversations where one coach might feel that he knows more about bowling than batting, and we'll have those kind of deep conversations as well. So it goes on that way, man. And I'm fortunate right now to be in this great culture out here in Caribbean.
I'd be interested to know, actually. So when you were starting your coaching career, kind of what professional batsman, did you sort of look at as being an example of great players technically around the world? Bonus points if you name any West Indian batsmen in that list.
But again, like I said, what happens is who you meet first as a professional player who comes across and works with you leaves an impact on you first. And through all the county teams which came across and they were trying to improve and get themselves up there, the two distinct names comes in my head is one, Alistair Cook, who was actually working on his skills before even he debuted for England. He had come to us for 3 times. He had come 3 times in those camps at CCI, and I'm talking about this institution was called as World Cricket Academy at that point, when Sri Hanuman Singh was leading it. And it was Zubin and myself who were managing a lot of the stuff along with other coaches. So for me, that is a standout one because we could see how he was fine tuning his skills, and then to see him on his debut against India in India, getting that 100, and then where he has ended up his career. Obviously, there were a lot of other people who have contributed to him. Graham Gooch was his batting coach even then, but then to pick up those brains, and like I said, that was an impact on me. And then the I would consider this one man who has kind of also helped me even now. I consider him as one of my mentors, Andy Flower. He
Yeah.
came across as a player come coach with Essex team at that point. And the first interaction which I had with him was just around the challenges of the same thing. He being an established player, and I myself as a young upcoming coach, or who wanted to be recognized as a good coach, was questioned very well by him that how much cricket I have played at the highest level. And then to have an interaction from there where we did a lot of one-on-one coaching, and he respected me for what I was able to bring in. And I would like to believe that I was able to give one or two important pointers to him as well, at whatever stage of his career he was at that point. Has left an impact on a great friendship between us.
But
So
that's,
those definitely at early on who I can remember at the moment.
I mean, if you're going to call two names, Alistair Cook and Andy Flower are two top names to call. But that's fascinating to me. And I think last year we had Chris Brabazon on the high performance culture manager, I should say, sorry, for Cricket West Indies. And I had quite a lengthy chat with him about coaching in general and imparting coaching to players. And I guess the reason why I bring that up is looking at it from the perspective of you being a coach to high profile players. How much of it, I don't know, I'm trying to think how you can even break this down, but how much of it is the coaching that somebody brings? Where's the line between what you're trying to impart to the player and how much the player is willing to listen? So, and I guess I talk about that with you. You mentioning Andy Flower is what made me think about that, because if a player has played X amount of games all around the world, can you really have an impact on them as a coach? Or is it about the player just has to be receptive? Do you understand where I'm coming from there?
It's a good question. So, but I think we have to put into perspective certain things. If it's a challenge where it's coming from also that coach, how much he has experienced himself around the world as a player, then it's a different proposition. Okay, but what I can say about that part first is that remember some of the coaches who are right now working around the world, they actually see that player's innings lot more number of times than that player himself. Okay, so and not necessarily just from technical point of view. It is purely about the patterns, the behavior, the approach which is bringing in when he is actually performing well, and all. And similarly, when there are runs are not coming, what is actually that is happening out there? Is it mindset of it, or is it the technical side of it? And you want to gauge that from not one or two innings. You want to gauge that from at least dozen innings to look into some real information out there. And I mean, I didn't mention a lot of other names because when you questioned about the players who left an impact at the start, I was just talking about my initial days of my coaching. But 7 years in Rajasthan Royals, there was Shane Warne, and then there was gentleman Rahul Dravid, who is now obviously going to be the head coach of the Indian team. I speak to him even now. And then most important person for me is right now Phil Simmons, with whom I have a different kind of a relationship. But what I'm trying to bring into perspective is that all these people have made me realize one important thing. It's the conversations which you have with the player, and what they are thinking at that point becomes very important point of anything that you want to start off. Okay. And through those conversations, what you try to build is partnerships of what areas where you can contribute to that player to progress him to the next level, partnerships of where the player wants you to intervene him and facilitate him, and at the same time sometimes just being a listener to that player, just to listen to him, what is that is going on in his mind, and do you have the patience to just to listen to him and give him ears out there. And then at times just being that friend who can push him, motivate him a little more on certain days when he doesn't want to do some stuff. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question properly.
No, that helps quite a lot actually. And as you were talking, I was thinking about which series was it? It may even have been. It was probably a bit of both of the recent South Africa and Pakistan series at home in the summer. And I remember that Craig Brathwaite used to say a lot in the press conferences because like you'd have the journalists and stuff saying, and what about this and what about that? And Craig's response was often quite similar. And Craig would say something like, we know our game plan. It's just about going out there and executing the specific game plan. And every time Craig used to say that, I always used to think, that's a very simple answer to the question. Not that, and that's not me criticizing at all, but that more just me thinking, oh, Craig's a very, very experienced international batsman, and he was able to basically narrow it down to, I've just got to go out there and execute. And I just wondered where that fits into kind of the batting mindset of, is it about shutting out a lot of the noise and just focusing on what? Do you understand where I'm
I know exactly what you're saying. So one of my mantras is happy dressing room. Okay, and when I talk about happy dressing room, in happy dressing room we have everything that we can talk about. Okay, because there is a different level of trust in that. So and our head coach obviously always points out, I'm talking about Phil Simmons now, where he says always look after the person on your left and on your right. Okay, and that's the kind of culture we're trying to build in. So I'm happy to hear that our captain was able to openly speak about certain things in a way he wanted to point out about the game plans, and we take utmost care. And I'm talking about not only just utmost care. There is a respect around what we are trying to achieve as a group together, and any thing which you want to build long term, it's on small steps which you take towards it. And I think at the moment, some of the players are trying to find their bearings in international cricket. Some of the players who have played more than 50 test matches are the ones who are trying to ensure that they take a lot more responsibilities. Okay. And also pass on the knowledge which they have to help out the other players. And create a learning environment where everything falls in place on itself. We were talking about situational awareness. We're talking about game scenarios, when you walk into, and test cricket is what I'm talking about at the moment. One of the things which we were also trying to, we were trying to push it across, and our players have embraced it, is to be ready not just for 1 or 2 days, for 5 days of test cricket. It's a grind of 15 sessions, which we want to take it on board and embrace it. And we are preparing, working very hard for it.
And we've mentioned his name a few times now. Someone who's been on the podcast before, someone we have utmost respect for, Phil Simmons. Obviously, you worked with him in the Afghanistan setup, and now you're back with him in the West Indies setup. Kind of, how has he helped your development as a coach, and what would you say about his qualities as a head coach and his strengths that he brings?
I'll first talk about my experience in Afghanistan. So when I went into that Afghanistan setup, Phil and I had never worked before, and for somehow he was able to get in touch with me, and he got me on board. So we have never worked before that. So for me, from that whole experience of whatever I was able to do with him over there, and to see myself over here, which means that something we have been able to put together. So I think Simmons will be able to answer more about that part. But in that 3 months, what I saw was the man who was trying to bring in coaches and give them freedom to bring their style of work as well. And at the same time, we were trying to align towards what we want to achieve from a particular player. So I was given responsibility of certain players to train them and get performances out of them. And luckily, we were able to get some performances in place. In the World Cup qualifiers, what we saw was a fairy tale story for Afghanistan. Okay, so obviously we had lost few games in the first round, and somehow we were able to get 1 or 2 wins, and then some lucky results which we wanted to have in our favor. And finally, obviously, we got the results which we wanted to win the World Cup qualifiers and get the team to the World Cup. But the most important thing which I was able to achieve from after that was I had my own personal challenges, and I had to resign for a reason with my own personal challenges. But to have the person's respect for my decision, and then to remember me for whatever good work I was able to put in over there, and to bring me back on board when he had an opportunity to bring me on board, purely for what he believed in and what he believed in, what I can contribute towards the team. So that's the kind of relationship I have with him, And over here, the kind of work which we all put together, again, like I said, that we sense of there is a sense of responsibility in place, and we share a lot of workloads. There is a freedom towards what I want to bring in from my style as well, but we are all aligned towards the team goal. And he has a lot of passion for West Indies cricket. That's all I can say at the moment from last 2 years, whatever I've seen closely from here. And there's a lot of work to put in place, mate. And I don't think outside people will understand that, because you're not seeing that day in, day out over here. And we do understand that, everything is result oriented, so people judge you on the results. So again, it's a journey, right? So you'll have few successful results and stories which you can probably talk about, and few where you feel that you could have done better but you didn't get that results, and then you embrace that as well, and you try to take the learnings on board, and bring the better version, not just for yourself but for each and every player in your team, and as a whole group together you want to put up a show.
That's really interesting, and you didn't use the words, but in the Caribbean, I'm reading between the lines, and I'm fairly certain that you've been brought up to speed with the how easy it is to be cussed in the Caribbean when the team doesn't win a match or doesn't do particularly well. But I'm glad you spoke about the journey, Monty, because Santokin, that when Phil came on, I think it was in February, we'd just beaten Bangladesh. It was shortly after beating Bangladesh, I believe, in that historic series at the top of the year. And then subsequently, we've drawn with Sri Lanka. Okay, yes, we lost to South Africa, but then we drew with Pakistan. And I think people often forget that actually we're talking Test cricket here. People forget that it's actually been a relatively speaking positive year in Test cricket in terms of small steps. And obviously, we're speaking to you with about a week to go before the Sri Lanka series starts, Test series starts. But one thing that Santoki and I, and I'm sure this question is the one that many people around the Caribbean want to hear your answer to, and obviously, I think you're a year and a half in, maybe into maybe a bit more working with the West Indies team.
Just be careful about the fact that I'm right from 2019, this 1st December, I was appointed.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to flag was that not to forget the COVID challenges, and around the COVID challenges, how many times I was able to come across easily.
Yes.
So I had to miss out on 2 tours.
Yes, that is of course correct.
But the first Test series I missed out, which I was looking forward to, was in England against England. Because I was totally locked in India and there was no way to get me out.
Yeah, I remember Phil mentioning in press conferences that you weren't able to travel for some of those series, and God willing, with the COVID situation, obviously you're in Sri Lanka at this moment in time, but God willing, moving forward into 2022, that will be less problematic. But yeah, as I was saying, sorry, in terms of the West Indies now, I guess I'm looking at this question from 2 different angles. So approach it how you want. Historically speaking, in terms of recent history, West Indies have struggled to regularly put up scores above, I'm not even going to say 400. I'm just going to say 300. And we know that certainly in Test cricket, generally speaking, if you get to bat first and you put over a score of 400, it's very hard to lose that test from that point onwards. But also, it would be remiss to just focus on that purely in the context of West Indies, because Test match batting in general, you don't see a lot of teams put up high scores a lot of the time. And I think sometimes people think that the West Indies are stuck in a bubble of low Test match scores, which aren't afflicting any other Test nation in terms of Test match batting. So I guess the question I've got is twofold. In part of the journey with West Indies and Test match batting, what's your view on that particular story and how we make incremental improvements? different conditions notwithstanding. There's new players in the team and so on and so forth. But also, what's your reflection on the quality of test match batting in general in the world game? Is it that bowling is just much better now, or has batsmanship generally declined? That's a lot. I'm saying a lot there that you have to unpack. So I'll let you get into it.
I'll try to make my best effort to answer you properly. But let's get into the first one, which is to consistently score around 300 runs. And I'm with you on that. That is something which is our goal as a team. And to get to consistently around 300 runs, one of the things which I have emphasized and team have embraced it as well is that how can we make sure that every batsman walks out there with an appetite of 100 plus balls to face, to occupy the place for that. And more importantly, if we are able to do that, let's say if the top order is able to take the most of the responsibility, you know that we'll end up playing more than 100 overs. And if by default, once you cross 100 overs, you will be able to achieve 300 runs. An average scoring rate in Test cricket is somewhere around 3.5 once you occupy it for long periods. So that's the kind of score which you can achieve, and which means the game is a lot about also, even now in Test cricket, is all about the grind and the patience. Okay, and I will give a lot of credit to Test batters purely because what I can see in front of my eyes. Okay, so it might not reflect straight away on the averages and the scores, but I can say that. Let me give an example of German Blackpool. People have spoken about he plays a lot of strokes, and there is aggression which is a lot more than what is required. I'm just taking some of the comments from here and there. Okay, I don't go too much into outside noise because that's not the way I operate. But I hear, and sometimes I get this comment from few of them, so I understand where they come from. So what I wanted to conclude in that part was that his aggression, his boundary scoring has always helped us to be in the fight. But what I'm trying to give him credit for is now that he has worked even more harder in terms of his technical side of work. So the way he's able to handle short balls, the way he's able to improve on his defense part, including how he's controlling with his top end, some of the small nuances of technical sides. Okay, we can only see it day in, day out. So when he's facing 100 odd balls in throwdowns, or when bowlers are asked to bowl on the fourth stump, and you see him leaving n number of balls in the net sessions, that's the first reflection of what you then confidently feel will happen as a transition into the game. Okay, whether or not that happens every time in the game is part of the journey which you're talking about. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. But there is a small progress which happens, and you take pride in that, and hopefully that turns out to Jeremy Blackwood consistently scoring big runs. And once he score big runs, I'm talking about big high scoring 50s, or 100 plus scores which individually he gives in, and then automatically that reflects the team scores of 300s. If you look at this year's games, and you pointed out rightly about the kind of results that we have got. If we compare all the teams around in this year, if they have played 8 test matches, and if you look at the results in terms of wins and losses and draws, I think we have 50% success rate out there somewhere. Okay, so which means that we should be feeling good about it. You cannot go too much behind, because it's important that you take the learnings from the past, but most important, enjoy being in now and be excited about the creative future. Okay, and that's how we are trying to take this ship forward. Now, when you compare the scores around, I think there have been instances this year where teams have scored 350 and 400. For example, England going into Sri Lanka, 2 test matches which they played here, did score on the high ends in their first innings, and in that the true reflection was someone like Joe Root scoring a double 100, or a player like Lawrence, who came in and he was able to show his real character with his aggressive approach and things like that, and able to get that 350s for them. So you need the top order batsman. At least you need 3 out of your top 5 to fire big runs, and that's the kind of approach which you are taking. But it's step by step. It's inch by inch where you can get there. And one ball battles is another one which we try to keep on explaining people, because it's always one ball stories which are separate to the other one ball stories. And if you can stay in present with our routines in between that, they will have that hunger, and they do show that hunger time and again, where they can end up facing more than 100 balls. And once they're able to do that, that appetite of occupying the crease for longer periods, we feel very confident that we can reach out to those scores. Okay. Did we complete all the answers towards your queries?
Yeah. I mean, Santoki's probably going to come in next, but just the only other thing I just wanted to for you to get into is, do you think Test match bowling has improved? And this is always a hard thing to kind of, I guess, compare eras of cricket. But so for example, the South Africa. It's gonna be interesting. Okay, I'll use South Africa. The South Africa series. Now, their pace attack of Nortje, Rabada, Ngidi, I think Maharaj was the spin bowler on the tour. I was very much of the opinion that they would have given a lot of Test teams a problem on those same surfaces, etc. Now, that's just South Africa, but to extrapolate that point further, do you think that bowling has improved in the last few years of Test cricket in general? So, for example, one of the stats that we often see is that being a Test match opener is much harder now, it seems, than it has been. Maybe this is what people say, but I'm getting your perspective as a coach. Do you think the bowling's improved, or do you just think that's just what people think is happening?
I haven't dig deep, so I cannot actually give you a conclusion on it. But if I just look at the broader perspective and think about it right now, I think overall, if you look at it, getting more results in Test cricket, which means that bowlers are doing something right. Okay, because you get those 20 wickets is how you get results. Okay, and I think when you gave the South Africa bowling attack example, obviously it was seamer friendly, so you will see that as a part of it. You look at the India-Australia series, okay, where some of the players who had hardly played one or two Test matches, they were able to give results as well out there. I'm talking about bowlers now. So I think, I mean, it's very hard to judge, just by, if you have to take it into consider a lot of context in the par scores of that venue, and then how the bowlers are able to take the advantage of the conditions out there. Let's take an example of our own Pakistan West Indies Test series in Jamaica. I think the conditions were nicely suited for the bowlers, and both side bowlers showed a lot of skills in terms of keeping the long spells with accuracy, as well as ensuring that runs were not easy to score. You had to be very patient out there. You would literally wait for those loose balls to score. So I think that consistency, when the bowler is able to bring and ask the right questions to the batters, time and time out, with consistency of those deliveries in one area, you can say that the bowlers have done a good job overall. So I would say the bowlers are still there around who are doing a good job, and it's the batters who will have to step up a little more.
I guess we have to talk about Bangladesh, one of the all-time great Test chases, 395 in that fourth innings. Sort of, as a batting coach, what was the sort of strategy going into that fourth innings? What did you tell the players? How did you sort of approach such a massive chase, and also with inexperienced players in the side?
Sometimes actually the inexperience helps, buddy, because I feel that they go with zero expectations themselves, and more importantly, they go with a fearless attitude. I thought that was one of the key things out there. And the other thing which I would give it to is the way we prepared. The Test team came in, and we had a lot of days to get them into the groove. And they believed into some of the game plans which were put in place, including the grind and the trust around defense. If people who have watched the game, both the games concluded on the last day in the last session. See, the other message was there with the team was to embrace, train for 5 days, and expect results on the last day. So to be in that fight and to ensure that we take it to that last round for that knockout punch was the key. And that's what we saw in that test series. And I think each and everyone had their own individual motivations as well. When you players get those test caps who have been waiting for a long period, and the hunger of achieving something at the highest level to get that respect from their own country for what they can do for their country is immense at that point. And you could see that reflecting into their performances out there. What happens now on the long journey is that expectation goes even more higher. So now, to meet that expectation time and time again is also one way of putting yourself under a bit of pressure. And where, if you just stay process driven, and if you just keep on staying hungry towards developing your own game, I don't think you can go wrong a lot. You will have some of those low times as well. You will have some of those innings which will not go in your desired outcomes which you wanted. But yeah, the Bangladesh series was something which was definitely special for us.
Do you sort of find it like a unique challenge working with particularly test match batters, bearing in mind there hasn't been any regional cricket, a domestic season for 2 years? How much of a challenge is it working with players on their technique when they haven't got games to sort of go back and build on?
That's a very good question, mate. And I think that is something which people don't understand. The challenge around that is huge. People don't understand the challenge around even bubble. I cannot explain how the bubble actually leaves an impact on every individual when your freedom is almost like your freedom taken away. So when you're back home as well, and if you are restricted to moving around, and you won't get the best opportunities to go out and train in the facilities which you normally get, again in the limited facilities which you have in place at the moment, is where the challenge comes across. So when something good has happened, let's hypothetically go back to the test series of Bangladesh, a preparation in place, and you get results, and within few weeks again we walk in, and in the same mood and the tempo you play Sri Lanka, you still end up giving the best show out there. Okay, yes, venues is different, that's fine, but people, players were up for it. Now you get a huge gap after that, a couple of months, and I was again stuck this year with the second wave in India, and I couldn't reach South Africa for the South Africa series in time. But we did have able coaches who all did the job. But what I'm trying to put across is that gap also is a challenge, where we are trying to push the players to do something on their own. But it's not always easy to just do it something on your own. You want to be in that environment most of the times so that you can excel. That's one of the challenges which is there at the moment. I just hope that when things go back to normal and then they end up also playing their first class games, it's few more extra opportunities which you use for the build up of your upcoming international series. That's something which is missing at the moment, and we only have to be creative in some way to be there and be ready.
That's just building off what Santoki said there, because I'm intrigued on that point. So you said at the top, I feel like you've been all around the world with cricket. So obviously you mentioned Nepal, obviously Afghanistan, in India, obviously the Caribbean. And one thing that we've often tried to kind of get across, but I guess I'm getting your opinion on this because I see your opinion as somebody who's experienced cricket elsewhere in the world and then come into the Caribbean system. And how ready do you feel for the pandemic notwithstanding? How ready do you feel international players are? And this doesn't specific to Test cricket. This could be any format really. But how ready do you feel international players are in the Caribbean compared to their counterparts in other regions? And I guess the reason I'm saying that is more about the impact a better infrastructure can have. And this isn't about, like I say, this isn't specifically related to COVID. I'm more so also talking about just what you've seen in general in terms of fundamentals and basics, etc. Because everybody always talks about that we've got talent to burn in the Caribbean, and yeah, I believe that to be true. But are there certain fundamentals that you think could greatly benefit the region prior to us talking about international level and so on and so forth. You may not have had enough of time in the Caribbean yet to properly see that because of COVID, but I'm intrigued by your views on that.
I can only bring into perspective of having lived in India for so many years, and I can only talk about the Indian structure, right? Because I was also a head coach of the state team for a year, and I know exactly how we operate. If I had to give an example of our first class team, the team which I was coaching, we had 9 Ranji Trophy games. I'm talking about 4-day games.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 4-day games. And the build-up for the 9 4-day games is we end up playing at least 5 practice matches to get into those 9 4-day games. Okay, and we have a season of 8 to 9 months for those players. And then, of course, the other formats. But if you just stick to red ball cricket at the moment, when I've obviously, because of COVID, I've not seen enough, so I cannot compare as in properly out there. But whatever I've heard and whatever I've understood, I think the advantage which in India we have is the number of opportunities which you get. One, to play the games, and also the number of opportunities which you get to train around the facilities which you get very regularly. Okay, and I mentioned that in terms of a constructive way of putting it across certain things. So if a player goes in, day out into an environment where he's supposed to be, invariably it rubs off on you, and invariably what happens is your mind is constantly ticking towards the areas which you want to get better at. There is no time when you're aloof and alone and your own voice now challenges yourself in a different way. We can take an example of bubble, right? When we could not connect to the world and you're just sitting in your own room, there is that negative voice also which starts speaking to yourself for whatever reasons. Not just cricket, I'm talking about in general, for anything. And you realize that how challenging that is. So, but when you are just around so many cricketers and you're bumping into cricketers talking about cricket day in, day out, that whole environment takes over. And you are just striving for excellence. You're just trying to get better at whatever you want to get better at. I think that's something, if that happens in 38 state teams, I'm talking about in India at the moment. Okay, so and the good part is that in West Indies we have 6 franchises. So imagine if the 6 franchises are playing each other. I think in the normal situation they play 10 games.
Yeah.
With those 10 games and the quality of surfaces and the venues which they'll get, and if that can add to from 10 to say let's say 12, something like that, it can make a difference. There are well-established organizations who also have this exchange program going on. I haven't heard about any exchange programs for that matter. So if pandemic goes and if that kind of opportunity comes, I think some of the players will blossom and grow even more. Because you rightly said about the talent pool which you have in your country, and the ability is tremendous because you can see it from 1 or 2 balls which you see, you can see the skills.
Yeah.
Now it's about how you ensure that happens more often, and for that you need some processes in place. For that you need a structure in place.
You you spoke about the talent pool and the latest kid on the block, so to speak. And he feels like he literally is a kid, but of course it's Jaden Seals, and you've had a chance to see Jaden up front. Sorry, day to day, I should say, and obviously we've seen him on the TV screens make such a immediate impact in the Maroon. But just how talented and how high is this guy's ceiling from your, obviously we've been talking about batting, but now I'm asking you as just a coach in general, seeing someone that talented at the age of 19, what should we all be as excited as we are?
At the moment we all are excited, and look, you're talking about from bowling thing, but as a batting coach I want to have bowlers like him, because that's how the batting will improve. When a quality bowler is asking you questions in the nets and you want to respond to that properly, it's all started that way for us when we saw how we responded to red ball practices in Antigua when we were building our preparation for the test matches against Sri Lanka. That's where we really got excited what he was offering in the nets.
Mm.
And to hear him out every time, even at that point, that he feels that he is meant for Test cricket. A young kid, when he talks like that, and he is embracing red ball crickets in a modern world where people look forward to, a lot of other formats up front. It was very exciting to see that, and just the way he transformed into the performance in the game. Uh, we have very high hopes with him. Again, it will come down to his own personal hunger and the strive what he'll be striving for long term in terms of excellence that we want, and to make the whole region proud. We are excited about him at the moment.
Yeah, most definitely. Santoki, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I guess sort of to wrap up, what would you sort of point out as your career highlight so far as a coach?
I mean, Bangladesh has to be one of the most important highlights. It was very sweet. I don't think and when you get an acknowledgement from the opposite team coaches uh, for the kind of application our players put in, and they were we were pleasantly happy to get that comments, and obviously they were surprised by the application. Makes you feel proud that there are certain things which you believe in and you put in place. One, first to have a plan, then to prepare for that plan, and then to execute that plan, and then finally to get the results for that. Obviously that has been one of the most important highlights.
Do you know what, Santoki? Although Monty said Bangladesh, I nearly forgot. And as Monty was speaking, I was like, wait a minute. But Monty, what about the epic Test match versus Pakistan,
Oh,
where where Josh, Kimar, Jamel, and Jaden won the Test match after we'd given up hope. So,
training.
as a batting coach, how does it make you feel when tail enders or lower order batsmen, if we want to call them that,
You have to call them
sweet? Is that even sweeter when you see
yes.
the lower order grind and do something like that?
Yes, pretty much. And one of the messages, all 11 do pad up. They all have bat, so they all are batsmen. As simple as that. All you define them is the top order, middle order, lower order batsmen. But there are no tail enders in our team.
so
Look,
what?
Roach was always capable of this, right? He has done it in the past.
Mm.
And I do remember in tea time when we all came together and we were discussing about how to approach this. And again, it was reminders from their side for a change, where they said we'll take it one ball at a time and let's see where we end up. And I was just in my position out there enjoying it with the crowd. And I must say, I have a lot of respect for the crowd, the way they were cheering up and supporting our players to get it home. And wonderful to see. I know one of the things which has stuck to me a lot is that both playing times in Antigua and as well as in Jamaica, because I have a tendency of standing at one spot outside, and you see the local regional people who are watching the game, whoever are limited people are allowed there. There's so much involved in every single ball, man, and I can hear them out, right? So, and I feel that love for the game is so deep, and love for the game for Test cricket is so deep. It means so much for them that if we can keep on getting results for the region, it's just such a proud feeling for us.
Most definitely. And I think because that was in Jamaica, and the thing is, although no one was allowed in, so just to give you an idea, Monty, we could hear on the TV screen the Jamaican groundsmen they made enough noise that you would have thought the full ground, the whole ground was full, given how much noise they were making.
Absolutely. I almost felt like they were all football managers shouting from the outside of the ring, taking care of the players.
so with every guest that comes on the podcast, and thank you, Monty, you've been absolutely brilliant. But with every guest that comes on the podcast, we always ask them the final 1, 2, or 3 questions to wrap up. And this is probably going to be a bit harder for you, just because again of COVID. But you have been around for some of the home series, most certainly. So your option choices might be limited, but you can still answer it. So first things first, what is your favorite ground in the Caribbean to watch the team play at?
I've not seen all the grounds, right? So I have to think about it properly. At the moment, I would say Antigua.
You have to say why though. You can't just say. You can't just say. You can't just say.
Okay. All right. I would say Antigua purely because I saw a lot of hundreds over there.
Okay, you get away with that one. What's your favorite ground overseas? Overseas. It doesn't necessarily have to be with the West Indies. Just in general, your favorite ground overseas.
I mean, everyone wants to experience Lords once, but so Lords is definitely one of those ones.
Fantastic. And the final question, we might have to tweak this one, but no, in fact, okay, yeah, we'll have to tweak the final one. The final one, who has been, so earlier on you spoke about Alistair Cook and Andy Flower as kind of like early batsmen that you respected, but who has been your favorite cricketer? I'll give you two chances here, batsman wise and bowling wise. Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what you're going to say here. Yeah, who's been your favorite cricketer, batsman wise and bowling wise? Can go from any era.
I want to correct that Andy Flower thing. Like I said to you, that the impact of that person interacting and I'm working with him was the most important part over there as my personal experience. But as far as my role model heroes, you can talk about a cricketer, favorite cricketer coming from India has to be Sachin Tendulkar.
I knew it. That's what I was gonna say. You can't say Tendulkar.
my love for the game increased because of Kapil Dev. When I was growing up, I was just around the age of 9, and my father was watching that World Cup 1983 against West Indies, and he had to win that first World Cup in the way that we won, and the way my father was explaining me all those things left an impact on me to always have posters of Kapil Dev in my room. So that's how I got into this game. But then there are not one or two men. I can tell you one thing. I've always enjoyed watching Viv Richards, whatever glimpses I had in those days. And then Rahul Dravid, just purely for his calmness and the approach which he brings in as a personality. There's so many things to look into when you try to. I can't figure out any one person. But like I said, definitely Sachin Tendulkar had a big impact on us because we were all same age groups growing up. And to see one of the same age group guy seen as a hero of our nation, it just attracted us to him so much. Okay,
we'll let you off. We'll let you off. You can have Sachin. I guess you can have Sachin after all. Santo, any last words?
I'm from Bombay. Sachin has grown up in Bombay. The whole attraction also around Sir Ramakant Achakar at that point. The way he was coaching the kids in Maidans and things like that. So a lot of connections out
there. Santoki, over to you. Any last words?
Excellent. Yeah, I just want to thank Mugan for coming on. And I know it's late in Sri Lanka, for coming on and giving some time. It's been a real education. And hopefully in Sri Lanka, firstly, hopefully the rain stays away for the 2 test matches. And hopefully when we do play, we can execute the game plan and get another famous win in Asia. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Cheers. Thank you so much, guys.
Much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been episode 52 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule